Welcome, everyone. It is a good time to be here. It is a great day to be checking out things outside, even from indoors, because it is the Great Backyard Bird Count. And we are very happy at the Environmental Science Center to have Kevin Porcupine O'Malley with us here, who is a naturalist over at the South Sound Nature School, who went out today to do a count for us in the snow to check out some birds. And we'll be able to chat about that as well. But before we start, I do want to acknowledge that even though we're in this online format, there was a count that was done today in Burien, and this is in Washington, if you're not familiar. And this area is the ancestral land of many Coast Salish people, particularly the Duwamish people. So we want to acknowledge the land and honor the land itself, as well as the tribal members of the past, of the present, and of the future, who continue to be stewards of this special land, who continue to share their education and their care for all that's around us, as well as participating in science projects and helping us further understand the plants and the birds and everything in between. Today, that is what we're doing. We are trying to understand more about birds, and counting them helps us do that, because researchers can't be in your backyard. So if you can submit information to help out those researchers, they can get an idea of where the birds are across the world. So it's happening on a big, large scale today, but to bring it back in, the Environmental Science Center is hosting this through sponsorship from the city of Burien to help people connect with their local birds and learn ways that they can take part. So we are fortunate that Kevin, or as I tend to know him as Porcupine, has gone out to do a count with us, and he has done this in the past. So I'm eager to hear what it was like there in the snow this morning. So please welcome Porcupine.
Hi, everybody. Today's count was really exciting. Wow, I didn't expect it to be as good as it was, but the birds are still out there and they're still moving around. And there was a couple ravens today that followed me the whole time, and their calls were just really cool and amazing, and they're so smart. They probably knew right where I was the whole time. As I got over there, I was trying to sort of shake off, coming out of the house, all my clothes on, and getting a feel for how I was going to move over there. And that's a really important piece, because, you want to be able to move around or sit down, depends on how you're feeling, and be able to observe birds. So moving around, you might catch a few more, but slowing down, you might also catch a few more first. So just getting a feel for the area, and then also how you're feeling, because that's going to change how you observe, and really paying attention to that and taking the time with yourself or with others to get into that sort of bird observation mode. As I'm moving over there, I'm starting to get a list of birds in my head. And at the point I'm at, I'm just doing that in my head, just naturally. I don't even really think about it too much, but okay, this habitat is there's going to be juncos here, and there's going to be bewick's wrens here, and crows and robins, and all those birds are really important for observation, especially if you're just starting off. Please pay attention to those normal birds in your backyard that you see every day, because that is observing them, their behavior, their shape, and their markings. And what kind of habitats, microhabitats they use, that's going to be able to be applied to any bird later, as you grow in your birding. And if you're good with calls, that's great. If not, just pay attention to those other things too, and you'll ease into the calls, and that just takes a lot of time. So don't be hard on yourself if you're worried that you didn't know what that bird was that called. And then also your range, like what, and we talk, this might be talked a little bit more about like where you were when you were, e-birding, which is making a list of the birds you saw and then adding it to eBird for, for research, habitat protection, and it could also ultimately be used for changing policy. So that citizen science piece is really cool. I do think that the love of birds for me comes from just like the awe of them, right? How cool they are. Like the song sparrows today, they were together, and how wonderful and beautiful that was. And that for me, I'm thinking, oh, okay, the song sparrows are going to start making their nests. It seems odd on a day like today, but they're the residents, and so. I've already seen a few other birds chasing each other around in a way where they're mating, and they're going to think about making their nests really soon here. And also, just really try to get a feel for that behavior and what you see maybe out of the corner of your eye, that flash of a junco, and you might see those two white marks on its tail. And where it is, like, is it in the thick bush, or is it on the side of a tree, or just 20 feet up in a tree? And all those habitats are different. And so they're very specific to those niches of each of those animals. So, and just spend a lot of time with shape. Don't spend a lot of time with size, like colors and markings. Yes, but size is really tricky to determine or even tell somebody like me about. I mean, unless you see a crow and a raven right up next to each other, you're going to have a hard time differentiating size between two critters like that. So if they're alone. Yeah, and it was just a lot of fun. I move slowly. I walk about 25 feet, and then I just sit there and listen, and I wait for movement. And then I walk another 25 feet. And if you haven't ever done that, and even if it's in a public park, which seems a little weird sometimes, it's super fun. I mean, it really is, because you're getting into that mode. You're trying to be like sort of, part of that bird's life, and those birds that are out there. And they'll just start coming to you if you do that, if you just sort of invite them in. And so, yeah, I think that was, I don't know, that was kind of like in a nutshell, what I experienced this morning. It was cold. I actually, my hands were really cold. So, and I did have binos out. And I would suggest for any of you that are new or that have been around a while to not bring your binos one day, just leave them at home and get a feel for where the birds are and without the binos. And that might actually help you a lot with your birding. That way you're not focused always on the equipment of it. And then it might tune you in a different way to the different habitats and the different birds that are in those habitats. Yeah.
Awesome.
Any questions?
Yeah, let me see. Actually, first off, let me share. I'll go ahead and share some of the birds that you found out there. I'll pop this in real quick. Share here. Let's see. Oh, are you seeing my screen over here, Porcupine?
Yes.
Okay, so I'll go from the current slide. There we go.
That's it.
Okay, so this is a list of some of the birds that Porcupine shared with us today. And feel free, if you are in Zoom, to go ahead and put any questions in the chat, type them out, or in the Q&A that we can read if you're on Facebook in the comment section. So I'll give you a moment to just digest and see some of these birds and see if you know all these birds or don't, because that's a pretty good amount that we're seeing out there. Oops, probably if I stay there. And then, Porcupine, I wonder if you want to comment on any of the ones that were out there as well, if there were any special ones or some surprising ones.
Yeah, well, so the flickers, three of those flickers were like, I heard them on the sides of the trees before I actually saw them. And right now in this light and in with them on the side of the tree, they blended in so well, but I could hear them knocking off stuff. They weren't drumming, but I could hear them knocking off. And then I looked over in the tree. I thought it was going to be one flicker, and it turns out it was three of them, like within 2 feet of each other. And so all three up the tree, and it was, I think it was a Douglas fir, but it was really cool to see those flickers together like that.
And you had 40 robins?
Yeah, 40 robins in a tree. Now, so if you look at that list, 10 dark-eyed juncos this was at a person in my neighborhood. So I do this route a lot, actually. So I know this route. So I went from that part of the walk down is a person in my neighborhood that feeds the birds, and she has got tons of feeders out. And so those 40 robins were sitting in a tree right by her house. I think 9 of those juncos were there. 1 European starling, which is pretty funny because usually you see a lot of them together. And the rest of those were all in her yard. Although the siskins have been out all over the place. They've been down at Seahurst and all around in the trees feeding on the red alder cones. So
awesome. That's great. Let me see if I can stop sharing for a second to see if I have some questions, because yeah, we may not have specifically identified where we were even. Do you want to state kind of where you were doing this for people who don't know?
Sure. Yeah, it's Dottie Harper in kind of downtown Burien, right by the community center.
Yeah, and for some folks who haven't been to Birdfest, we have been doing this at the Environmental Science Center. We've been hosting the event at the Burien Community Center since 2017. And we've had that as a place where partners can come in and share activities with different people so they can see what's happening from different organizations and community groups around birds and plants, as well as presentations. And the nice thing is there's a park, a city park right next door. So we use that to actually take folks out to do bird counts, and like the one that Porcupine has done today and previously. So it's a nice place to do all these things. And we wanted to maintain that level of scientific conduct and continue to do the counts in a similar place like we have for the past couple of years. And that's why Porcupine went out in this area to look and listen for some of these birds. And we do have someone asking how you identify a crow from a raven.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the ravens, this morning the crows were calling, and they just have that really, like, to me it's more of a high pitched call, and then the ravens started calling about a quarter of the way in, and they're just a deeper call, and then they do their other calls, which are multiple different things, and then I saw them fly over, but it was too far for me to really get size on them. And then when they got closer, I realized this is such a bigger bird. And again, I'm going against what I'm saying is, like, I can see now the size. It's now 20 feet away from me. Actually, I got a video of it, but it then is, its beak is so much more robust. And sometimes you can differentiate those with habitat. Crows are usually together and down by the water, where ravens are usually maybe in smaller groups and in the woods. But that can always be either way. I mean, on either one of those. But that's just how I do it. Carly, what do you?
I think size is a big deal, and like the shape of the tails. Because isn't it more like a diamond shape for the raven versus the crow? Is that one of the tools that you use?
Yeah, if you're seeing it from underneath, if you can do that, yeah.
And the sounds, right? The sounds are a big deal as well. And that's something that you may have noticed even on this list. There are certain things that were heard versus seen. So when you're doing these bird counts, that counts because you can identify that bird through either. And I'll pull that list up again and show you the list from last year to see anything in comparison, to see if they were similar birds. We did a list each year, so I can show you some of those to get a sense of what things were coming in or not, depending on the season. So let's see if I can pull this up real quick again. Share this. So this is from last year, and this gives you an image of Dottie Harper Park. So if you haven't been there before, we were fortunate to have more than 100 people come to this event last year. And there were many who'd never birded before, and they took part in this global science project, which is so exciting. So here they were able to look and listen, and you can see we had 9 species that were found last year, and they're not all the same that we found this year, which doesn't mean those birds weren't around then. It just means at the time that we were out counting is when we were able to see or hear them. And we had done most of these from 10 to 1 or 2 o'clock over the years, but we only did them for about 15 minutes throughout the day. So let me see if I can show. So here, this could give you a larger sense of how things have gone from 2017 to 2020 to where we saw a different amount of, maybe similar amount of species in here, but they weren't all the same species. And that's where the fun comes to see what was around and what wasn't. And to err on the side of caution, if you just aren't certain about what a bird is, you don't count it, right? Because you don't want to put the wrong one in if the coloration was off and you don't know, or the sound was off. So there could have been more birds around. We just may not have been skilled enough to know exactly what those birds were. And there's a good amount on here. Do you have any comments? Because I know you participated in 2019.
Yeah, well, what today, and you know, as you a little bit back to what I was saying is I'm getting a feel for who may be out there when I'm out there. So I have my like habitat or my species list in my head, and I was missing, notably missing the brown creeper and the nuthatch. So I was like, where are they? And I know they're here somewhere. Like especially the brown creepers like to hang out with the golden crowned kinglets, and that Townsend's warbler was also in that group today. There were it was a bigger group of birds, but like you just said, they were way high up in the trees and only a few dipped down. So I couldn't positively ID any, but that group was, you know, the ruby crown that I saw was also in that group. It popped down actually all the way to the ground. And so that was pretty cool to see. Yeah, that was, those should have, the other one that I'm curious about is the, I believe last time I was there, what was I there in 2017?
I know you did a count in 2019 with us. You led counts in 2019, but I know you were, I think, at all the other ones. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So the 2019 one, I was wondering where the Pacific Wren was too. So this is also where I do my sit spot, which is something that, you know, some people do where they just sit in an area regularly over time and monitor it. So that spot is exactly where I do it. And so I know the area pretty well, but yeah, I missed the Pacific Wren too. It should have been there somewhere. I just probably was underneath all the salao, you know, or something.
And for those of you who haven't heard the Pacific Wren, which did they now move that to be called no, I think it's now called the Pacific Wren, and it used to be called the winter wren. But it is a bird. If you haven't heard it, I would say check it out online. It has one of the longest calls, and it's the longest, coolest. So even if you're not seeing it, you can identify that bird from afar, which is really, really neat. And similarly, somebody has a question about identifying some birds, which would be helpful to have like your sit spot and staying in this one place to see what's coming in and what's moving through. And they live in Seahurst, the Seahurst Park area of Burien. And they often see very tiny little birds that gather in a certain bush, but they are off in the distance. So they're wondering if they should assume those are chickadees or different birds. And also they're just asking what's the best time to observe birds in general. If you have comments on that.
Well, yeah, those little ones is tricky to tell if they're always doing the same thing and you know what they are. I mean, then maybe they're bush tits or maybe they're chickadees, but yeah, you will get a feel for once you get, spend that time with those different birds, like they're going to act differently and it'll be part of what you know. And you'll be, okay, those are acting like bush tits, but you can't even see them. They're far enough away. They're acting like, chickadees, because, most birds don't hang upside down, underneath a cone, and chickadees do. And so if you see that from far away, if you see like a flickering up in the high, conifers, then you might be talking about a golden crowned kinglet, because they do that. And some of these birds, other than the hanging upside down, they cross over. So you got to be careful. Might be a few of them do it, a few of them don't, but you start to get a feel for that. That gestalt, that like image you see of them, and then it's gone. So that with little birds, that's important to pay attention to, because it might just be a second where you get to identify it.
Right.
So.
Yeah, and there's a lot of different things that go into it, where there are 4 key things that I usually use for identifying birds, which includes, what does it look like, depending on the coloration and the size of things, what does it sound like, where is it, and what is it doing? Because some of those birds are going to be up super duper high, and some of them can be down low. So the more you sit and watch and listen, or watch things online, or use the phone apps or books or brochures, you can get a sense of where some of those birds tend to be, and also throughout the year, because some of them migrate, some of them don't. You may have seen I have a funny felt board behind me, because I just did a story time with the library, and we were talking about how some birds are in different places, and they choose to be there because of the food they're eating. So that's the next step too. When you realize a bird is in a certain bush or a certain tree, you can hone in on what are they doing there. Are they eating berries? Are they eating seeds? Are they eating insects? Which then leads into this whole fun thing about how the whole system supports everything, which is really, really fun. So as you can tell, we can just talk on and on about birds. And how fun it is to just to learn more about them, regardless of what day it is. I think it's really fun. And if we didn't share, it is the Great Backyard Bird Count. So this is a time today, if you're watching this live time, it is Saturday the 13th, and this bird count will go through Monday. It's the Great Backyard Bird Count, and it's put on by the Cornell Lab of Ornithology in partnership with Audubon, and I think sponsorship through Wild Birds Unlimited. And again, it's a global thing, so that we can find out, just get a snapshot of this one weekend, where birds are and what they're doing. You can also do this every single day, which is pretty fun. You can still put this information online to help researchers learn about what's going on, but this gives us a really big amount of scientific data to kind of go through at the same time. And we have a question about learning how to identify things, and what are some references for local bird identification. So if you want to share some first, Kevin, I'll go ahead and share some after.
Mm-hmm. I would say the walks, Audubon, local chapters to do a lot of walks. So that would be one way of just getting with people who are into it. And those are a lot of fun and a great learning experience. And just the Sibley's Guide to Western Birds is a really good guide. The Merlin app on your phone is the one I use for from Cornell. Cornell, All About Birds. I think the general guides are more national than they are necessarily local, but then the people would be local, you know, finding groups that are doing programming. I teach through South Sound Nature School birding classes, basic birding at Seahurst, and a raptor class now. So there's a lot out there, you know, there's so much cool stuff. And then a lot of it's self-taught too, you know, I mean, you if you're looking to hang out with a group, they're there. But if you're looking to just do this on your own, you can, and you can do it anywhere. That's what's cool about birds. And, you know, you can take the science path, which is awesome, and the ID path if you're that kind of person. But if you're just the kind of person that just is into the awe of it all, then go out there and enjoy them too, because and don't spend a lot of time with writing them down. And maybe someday you'll get into that. But I mean, it's just that appreciation is really important either way. You know, and you could go down both avenues there too. So yeah.
I agree on all those points. And I will also share my screen to show you at our BirdFest website, which you probably went through if you're in this, but if you haven't, we have a whole list of resources there as well, with the understanding that these resources keep coming out, which is amazing. There's so much more that comes out, but below our schedule, if you want to scroll down, we have some videos and some books, but there are other ways you can look for things or look for birds, either like Kevin was talking about on your phone as a mobile app, online. So we have some of those examples. There are other local sources, especially Audubon's, who have their websites set up per region. So it's nice to go to All About Birds because you can see all the birds, but if you really want to know what's just in your state, it's nice to find a local resource for that. And Seattle Audubon does a great job of honing in on what birds are in Washington. I'm imagining many other Audubon chapters do the same across the states. And they also have a native plants database, which is really neat because you can put in your zip code and it'll tell you what plants are around you that you can then use to attract the birds into your yard. And that's extremely helpful because then you get to see the birds or just know the plants in your neighborhood, even if you don't have a backyard for that. And you can start to see that relationship, as well as finding out things online of different projects like Project Feeder Watch. But books are helpful. They're really good for those resources to look into throughout the year. There's also brochures that are very handy. I tend to use these because I don't want to always have a big book and it's lighter. So I just take these out with me, especially with large groups so we can all look, and kids. It's really easy to use those brochures. And then there's fun games too, which we added because birding is fun. So the more you can make it fun, the better it is. So there are lots of resources out there, but I will echo, it's really important just to be out and to not be hard on yourself if you don't know what bird is what, and recognize that's this beautiful species out there just like me, and appreciating it is the first part. So yeah, it's for the love of birds. So is there anything else that you would like to conclude with to share? Because it's just such an exciting day and time, and I'm happy that all of you joined us now, and we'll keep birding in the future.
Yeah, it kind of keeps me, I don't want to say keeps me stable, but you know, the birds out there knowing they're there and knowing they're out there, like living their lives. It's cool that they're there, and they're always kind of around, and they're a really neat species to study. And it can be a lifelong study, so.
Yeah, they take us out of ourselves and back into nature that we're all part of. And that's such an important element as well. So I'm just so tickled and glad we can all share in this celebration of birds and continue with aiding in science and caring about our community. So I want to thank everyone for joining. Thank you, Kevin, for going out in the cold. And feel free to shoot back any other questions that you have to me. Find our information online. We'll put this one up, the recording, so you can watch it or share it with some other folks later. But in the meantime, happy birding. Thanks, y'all. Thanks, Kevin.
Bye. See you later.
See ya.